Good morning, everybody. It looks like everybody can hear me. Yes. Welcome to our session today about email analytics by Mailchimp and Usercentrics. My name is Franz Riedl. You actually see there a picture of me, what I looked like 10 years ago. I'm the head of DACH for Intuit Mailchimp. Very importantly, if you want me to send you this presentation afterwards, feel free to reach out, or if you have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out via email or via LinkedIn. Happy to send this over or answer any questions you might have. I should also mention that we have a booth over in hall A4 F03, relatively big, hard to miss actually. So if you want to talk after this, after the Q&A even, then feel free to come by. So let's dive in. Before we talk about email analytics, I wanted to share some general benchmarks, some general stats. These are numbers we see for our user base in 2025. So an open rate of about 35%, a click rate north of 2.5%, and an unsubscription rate about 0.22%. If your numbers vary from this a lot, if they're vastly different from this, you should probably look into them a bit more. Obviously, these numbers are different by industry. So, for example, an e-commerce company that sends, actually I see so many phones, will just send the presentation to everybody. Makes it easier so you can actually focus on the content. So numbers are different by industry. Of course, the fourth email in a week from an e-commerce company that wants to sell you something might be opened a bit less than the one from your favorite non-profit organization. If you want very specific numbers, also by different countries, there's a report you can download on our website. It's broken down even further, so quite interesting to get some benchmarks. I know this is usually interesting. Obviously, these numbers vary a lot by frequency, by the degree of personalization, by how relevant the content is, frankly, also by how interesting the subject line is. So you have an influence on these numbers, but these are to give you some benchmark, some orientation. Now that we've talked about the benchmark, let's look at what the numbers actually mean. An email sent, fairly straightforward. That's an email that you send out. This does not mean that the email necessarily arrives anywhere, right? It's just that it leaves your server, you're sending it out. In case somebody does not get the email, we talk about a bounce. So there are two different types of bounces, a soft bounce and a hard bounce. Soft bounce is something temporary. It happens quite frequently in Germany for web.de or GMX. Their free accounts don't have a lot of data storage, and we see this. How do I say this? Sometimes, especially with seniors that don't use frequent email as frequently, that these mailboxes get full, and there's a soft bounce, so the email cannot be delivered. Once the inbox is emptied again, the email will get delivered later. A hard bounce means the email just doesn't exist. The email address doesn't exist. The email will not be delivered. For those of you that are in B2B, this is actually quite interesting because it tells you something. It's actually a piece of sales intelligence. It can tell you that the person you're trying to sell to or the customer you're speaking to has left the company. So it might be worth looking into where that person has actually gone and moved to, so you can sell them there or reach out to them at their new position. If the email was sent and didn't bounce, it hopefully shows up somewhere in somebody's inbox. That sounds fairly obvious, but the question is, how is that measured? So there's an open rate. Whenever, well, we track this in a way that there's a graphic, a very like 1 pixel size image in the email, and once the image is loaded, the email appears as opened in your reporting. With the number of opens, you can calculate the open rate. Just email sent divided email opens divided by the number of emails sent. The number of opens is generally, or at least it was for a long time, underestimated because some people who use desktop clients like a Thunderbird or Outlook have image loading deactivated. So they might be able to read the entire text, the entire email, but it would not appear as open for you unless they load the images. I just said it was underestimated because a few years ago, Apple came up with the Mail Privacy Protection, MPP. And what Apple does is, for an iOS device or for a Mac that's connected to a Wi-Fi, and for people who use Apple Mail on that, Apple opens the email and downloads all the images to their server in the region. So this means that the email would appear as opened by a user, even though Apple opens all of these emails for the user ahead of time. This would obviously impact your numbers quite a bit. This is why, for example, in Mailchimp, there's a very simple option. There's a little check mark, a little tick that you can set. So the Apple opens will not be counted as proper opens, so your numbers will be more correct. This, however, does have some other consequences. So if you're using inside a marketing automation flow, you have triggers, right? And if you use email open as a trigger to have a next action, maybe send a certain follow-up email, this is impacted by Apple MPP. So what you might want to do is, if you want to use this, exclude Apple users that use Apple Mail from this type of automation and have a different type with a different trigger for them. Otherwise, these automations might not work for you as you are hoping or intending, as they should. MPP also has advantages for you, because as I said, anybody on Apple Mail, they're connecting to the Wi-Fi, this would appear as an opened email. So if you have somebody in your list that uses Apple Mail and, let's say, for 2 months or so, has not opened any email, that's a fairly good sign that this is not an active email account anymore. Because if they were to turn on their computer, the email would have been downloaded. So this helps you to clean your lists. You should do that quite regularly, clean your email lists, not only for Apple users, of course, but for any inactive user. So anybody that is inactive or over a certain period, you should remove these from your system. That's because the email inbox providers see the number of active users or active recipients of your email as an indicator for how relevant your email is, or how likely it is to be spam or just not relevant for people. So also, it helps you reduce the price with your email service provider as well, because usually we charge by number of contacts. So that's a nice side effect. But you should do this in any case, regardless of the price, just so you have good stats and ensure high deliverability. Next up, the click and how it's measured. Fairly straightforward. Click means the user clicks any type of link, maybe text, maybe an image, maybe a button. These are tracked individually. That's very important on a user level, but also on a campaign level, which obviously helps you to compare the result and the effect and the effectiveness of your campaigns over time. The good news now is you can measure this in a very privacy compliant way. So for tracking, all the links are individualized. The tracking pixel is individualized. So we are talking about person-specific, or how do you call it, person-based tracking, right? I should mention at this point that this is not legal advice, but my personal opinion and experience. But from my perspective, this needs, and I think many would agree, individualized permissions. This is not just your general marketing opt-in, but you need to ask for this specifically. The user needs to give you consent for this specifically, because obviously it's very specific about a person. When did they click? Where did they click? What URL did they go to? This, to be honest, is often overlooked in my experience and not optimally maintained. So you might wanna check if you're doing this correctly. That's where a solution like Usercentrics Preference Manager can be very beneficial. It ensures legal clarity and gives you full control, or gives actually the user full control in a very easy and user-friendly way. So you see you basically see the settings there. You can you can ask for very specific permissions by the user. The whole thing is very transparent. So you can define all the specific topics you want consent for, or you need consent for, actually. And the nice thing is, the consent is not hidden in some form, but it's displayed where it makes sense, right? So it could be a branded widget, or it's embedded somewhere in a flow that the user is going through anyhow and interacts with. So this means fewer drop-offs, and at the same time more transparency for the user. So actually exactly what we want. Once you have the permission and it's captured, this is automatically synced to Mailchimp, right? So you can respect your user's wishes, as you have to, actually, when sending out email. So there's no tracking if there's no opt-in. So it's a very simple, compliant, and automated way to make sure you're playing by the rules. For example, you would sync this information to a group of people where you know they don't want to be tracked, right? And for those that don't allow tracking, that's super easy to set up in Mailchimp. Couple of boxes to check or uncheck in this case. Then you have two groups. You send out to the ones who gave you consent. Obviously, you will enable the tracking to get the stats, but you respect the user's wishes that do not want to be tracked. Email success is obviously not just about open and click rates, right? It goes well beyond that. Normally, I assume that applies to all of you, you want the user to take a further action, maybe buy a product, sign up for an event, download something, whatnot, any type of conversion after that. There are different ways of measuring this, and this is a quite cool one. This works by understanding how many people actually took an action after you sent the email, or actually how many people took more of an action than the ones that didn't get the email. So in this example, we have a cohort here, let's say 5,000 people. We think they are interested parties to buy. They might have clicked an add to cart button earlier or something, right? And what we would do now is split this cohort into two segments, the email segment and the control group. So we send an email out, and then we look at a time span, let's say 2 weeks maybe, what did these people do afterwards? And you would see in this example that the ones that got the email had a 7.5% conversion rate, 12K in sales, whereas the ones that didn't get the email had a 3% conversion rate and 2.75K in sales, right? So in this example, you would have a conversion rate uplift of 4.5%, or 9,000 and something euros, which is quite good and proves this. One word of caution here: don't look at the absolute numbers if the groups are not the same size, right? Then it's about the conversion rate, the relative uplift. In practice, I would probably not make them the same size, but have the control group smaller, big enough to be statistically relevant. But you do want people to get the email as you expect. This will impact sales positively. This is quite great. You're not dependent on any cookies or anything. You have the data who you sent to, and you have the data who bought from you afterwards. So it doesn't matter if they, I don't know, switch devices or opted out of something. You will have the clean and clear data to prove the success of this. Another way, more the traditional way, is click tracking, as I described. So the email is delivered, and when somebody clicks, we all know this, the email that you get usually does not have the link directly to the URL you want to go to, but it goes through a tracking server. And if the user gives you, then the user gets the cookie consent banner, and if they give you the banner, this is tracked as a session. But because the cookie consent is always in between, you pretty much always, or I would say always actually, you have more clicks in your email than sessions on the website, right? Because the session is only tracked if the user gives you consent, and not 100% of people obviously do that. You should make sure that your Google Analytics is set up correctly. This can be done by writing campaigns, and then you can see the sessions, the engaged sessions, all these metrics here, and that allows you to compare your different email campaigns and the results over time. To allow that, you need to make sure that you have UTM parameters on all email, right? You can do this when Mailchimp manually. You can also integrate Google Analytics and tick a box, and it inserts these UTM parameters automatically. So that is quite good. But there's one thing people usually forget, and I would bet a lot of money that at least one company in this room, or maybe more than 50%, do that. That they don't put, or you don't put, UTM parameters on your transactional email, like account creation, password reset, or an invoice. And for example, with the invoice, that's a quite clear one. In e-commerce, often people use their invoices as sort of a bookmark. They search for the company name in their inbox, or the product name they might remember. They find the product they purchased before, they click on the product, and they buy it again. So this is clearly a purchase that comes through an email, because that's where it came from. But without the UTM parameter, it will not look like this in your tracking. If you don't have UTM parameters on your tracking, you will see something like this. In this case, actually 10,000 sessions, so not irrelevant completely. These clicks look, or they're categorized as referrals, right? But when you look deeper, those are not referrals. You see web.de, you see GMX there, you see some other providers. These are clicks from people that use the webmail clients of these providers. Click a link, and because you don't have the UTM parameter, they're not attributed in Google Analytics correctly. Had these users opened the emails on a desktop client like Outlook or Thunderbird, they would show up as direct traffic. So they would be categorized again wrongly, just because they didn't come from a URL, not as a referrer, but from direct. Still, something we don't want. We want them categorized correctly, obviously. To make sure your Google report, your reporting looks good, you should stick to Google's suggestion on the parameters. You should use email. This might be a bit confusing. These are horizontal lines, like vertical lines, to separate the different ways email can be spelled, maybe in different countries or so. All of these work. But if you, for example, use newsletter as the source or the medium, this will not automatically show up in your Google channel report, right? It will show up as unassigned by default. So you should make sure to use email in one of these two fields, depending on your preference. I know we don't live in a perfect world. You usually don't have clean data, but this might not have been set up the right way in the past always. So it's basically a bit too late, but the good news is it's not really too late. What you can do is create a custom channel group then, to basically gather all the ones you missed to get a proper view on what email actually did. So in this case, to the custom channel group, how that works, you would actually add newsletter if you called it newsletter in the past, and you would also, of course, add the deref example that I showed you earlier. This will help you to really capture the effect of email in your tracking, and let you look beyond this wrong original categorization. Email, you might know, is very often involved in most cases, or in many cases, in a customer journey, right? It's a part of many journeys and flows the user goes through. So you should have a very close look at this. let's see. Yeah, in this example, might be a bit technical, not sure. This is the model comparison view in Google Analytics, right? And we compare two different attribution models. On the left-hand side, we have the ads preferred last click model, typically used to optimize your ad spend, and I think it makes sense to have a look at it. But if you want a proper view of how much influence email actually has on your results, you would rather use a cross-channel data-driven model. And in this comparison, quite interesting, you see 16.8K versus 22.6K. That's more than a 31% increase from the last click attribution model if you use the other model. While the ads preferred model absolutely makes sense to and might be the right choice to optimize your ad spend, if you want a more holistic overview of the customer journey, you would use the cross-channel data-driven model. That gets you, and neither of them is wrong. It's just a different look at the same data. But using the model comparison and the multi-touch attribution model, the data-driven model, gives you a truer view of in what part email was involved in, or in which purchases in this case email was involved in. So we talked about connecting your revenue to email marketing, running a control group, making sure you have the right cookie consent, for example, with Usercentrics, and UTM parameters, again, very, very important. But the next question is, how do you actually make sure the email ends up in somebody's inbox? When you send unwanted or irrelevant emails to a user, they might be flagged as spam. One of the drivers for this is a high unsubscribe rate. That's just indicative that a user doesn't really want the email or it didn't resonate. Maybe it's different than what they expected. In any case, it was not relevant to them. The bounce rate, on the other hand, rather indicates that you don't have an up-to-date, a cleaned email list that I mentioned earlier, or it could even hint to the fact that you got the emails. I'm not saying anybody in this room would ever do that, from shady sources. You know, you can buy some emails somewhere. And both these numbers, if they go up, that's a sign for inbox providers that, you're too close to spam, and that will, over time, will or might lead to the fact that more of your email lands in the spam folder, which we obviously want to avoid. I put some numbers together here. You can probably find different numbers. There's probably no clear right or wrong except for one of these numbers, but I wanted to give you like a frame of reference, right? So if you're in the left column for any of these numbers, I would strongly suggest you have a look at this. This one, that's definitely the right or wrong number. These are requirements by Google and Yahoo. They're sender requirements. So if your spam complaint rate is above this point, you really should act now, because you will end up in the spam folders. So if you're on the left-hand side, anywhere in that column, please do something. But even in the middle column, there is some room for improvement. If you're on the right-hand side, I think it's safe to say you're in the clear. Another aspect is delivery rate. You might have heard of that. It's actually the inverse to a bounce rate, right? If you have 98% delivery rate, you have 2% of a bounce 2% bounce rate. After the session, what you should consider or monitor regularly is warning signs. So if over time in your campaigns you see unsubscribes going up, bounce rate going up, the spam complaint rate going up, at the same time you would usually witness falling engagement rates and conversions, then you should really dig a bit deeper and find out why that is. This is usually monitoring these numbers will help you be aware and maybe get ahead of the problem before too many of your emails land in spam. Oh, that's the right button. Yes, content is super important for deliverability, right? inbox providers obviously scan the content. That is the ratio of text and images. That is how many links are in there, where they link to, but also the words, the content itself, right? If you use something like giveaway, guaranteed, win a free iPad or something, that might be something that triggers the spam sensors of the providers. We have some tools built in to help you with that. But I would just advise to use common sense. Put yourself in the shoes of the user. Is this a relevant email? Do they need to get it? Is this person maybe at the right point in their customer journey, in their life cycle, to get this email? And I think you'll be on the safe side. There are also lists of spammy words to avoid. I don't think you see a lot of surprises there. But this is something to look out for. Another thing, and that's very easy to do and 100% in your control. Make sure that your configuration, your server configuration, is correct. So there are three different things you need to look out for. Three different settings, so to speak: SPF, Standard Policy Framework, DKIM, and DMARC. All of these are listed here. They will be listed or explicitly and in detail described by your email service provider. For example, at Mailchimp, we have very, very detailed documentation on this. This is also what Google, Yahoo, and some others look out for. So please make sure you have this. Please make sure the settings are right and check them. You can use a tool like MX Toolbox to see if these settings are correct. What you should also do, I often see this, people who switch to Mailchimp, for example, they still have their old email provider, or maybe two old email providers in there. So you should remove those. If you're not using a software anymore, remove them from the entry. So really only the sender you use is the one listed there. One thing you can do, and you should do, that makes your life easier, is choose an email provider that has a higher, like overall, a very high deliverability rate. It might be surprising, but many email providers don't send out the emails themselves. They have a third-party provider that actually does the email sending for them, which leads to the fact that they might have less control over, let's say, the neighborhood. What other companies are sending email alongside of them, and this influences deliverability negatively. So we've been doing this for around 20 years, have our own infrastructure. We're extremely strict about who we accept as a client. We decline certain industries completely where we know there's a lot of spammy behavior going on. We also, when somebody uploads emails that don't look there as if they're acquired correctly or in a legal way, we would also not allow that client to join. Sometimes we get people who are a bit frustrated about that. I'm sure nobody in the room would be declined, by the way. But we need to do this to make sure that our emails actually arrive. As I said, we've been doing this for a very long time. Have hundreds of people just working on getting the emails into inboxes. So yeah, choosing a provider that has a high deliverability rate is something, is a good starting point. I read of a provider recently, email provider, that has a 74% deliverability rate. That's not something you want to work with just because it will make your life a lot harder. So I think we're at the end. I have, I've mentioned we have the booth over there, A4F03 if you want to join, or if you want to have a talk about this. And we do have some time for Q&A. We also have many of the colleagues of Usercentrics in the room who will go around with the microphone, and also are probably much better able to answer questions about Usercentrics specifically. So, any questions? Who dares? Oh, actually, a question from my side. Who of you has UTM parameters for transactional email? Wow. Probably 20%, give or take. More than I expected, to be honest. I think it makes sense. Thanks. Any questions by anyone? Is anybody there? You have the chance now. Any question? I can't really see to the back of the room. Okay, if there are no questions, I'm still here if you want to talk one-on-one. Otherwise, thanks a lot. Oh, was that a question? Oh, sorry. There's a question now. There's a question. Yeah, he's getting me the microphone. Otherwise, I would have. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. My name is Anastasia.
I think it's on. Yeah, it works. The others hear you.
Yeah, can you please name top three, okay, from your point of view, top three trends in email marketing in 2025?
Okay. That's an interesting one. Generally, I see people using email more, with the budgets being a bit tighter and email still being one of the most effective and efficient and cheapest solutions to get to customers. I see people moving off paid channels and looking at email as a channel more. I would actually advise that to many businesses I see still in Germany, especially. Many businesses send the same newsletter to basically everybody. The only personalization in there is the first name or last name, and that makes me quite sad because there's so many cool things you can do. And that's I think the second trend I would see, personalization. People look more at, or obviously you will make your emails much better, more relevant to the user if you can personalize. And using AI enables you to also create the content to personalize, to send more different emails to different groups, right? I think that was a restriction in the past. People did not have the capacity to write different variants or create different imagery. This has changed. Like AI enables us to create much more faster, so we can segment into smaller segments. So AI is one, personalization is one, and I think just using email more across the customer journey, thinking more about making the most of it, as budgets are maybe a bit tighter than they used to be in the past. Any other question? Yes, there's another one.
Hello, thank you so much. My question would be, do you have any advice for subject lines? I think most people struggle to find the perfect subject line. They use emojis, they use maybe the name, maybe it's too long, maybe it's too short. Do you have any advice?
Yes. Yeah, quite a few parts. So the subject line. There's a maximum length you would use, and most of the email tools, I think, at least in Mailchimp, I know we tell you when it's too long, right? Because you need to think about when it's in the inbox. Actually, I would start by thinking about the subject line. Most people look at the actual email. A lot of time is spent on crafting a beautiful looking email, the right text. But email starts much earlier, right? Even an effective subject line, even if the person doesn't open the email, can already get your message across. If you have a 20% summer sale, people don't need to open, right? The subject line tells them that. Generally, I would think about your audience a lot. I would always recommend to A/B test. This is very simple to do. See what works. Also look at past subject lines. What works better with your target audience? You mentioned emojis. That's quite important as well. I think that can work. However, emojis also in email should not replace entire words. You all know probably the Barrierefreiheitsförderungsgesetz, or whatever it's called exactly, will come into effect in June 28th, I believe. This also affects email. So you must make sure your emails are readable by machine reading, or help people who have impaired vision to also understand them. So an emoji should never replace a proper word. At least that's the official way. Apart from that, yeah, something catchy, something you will resonate, but this is general advice. I'm sure you know this. I would actually go by testing. I think testing is the far best way to do this. And make sure it's definitely not too long, and look at what has worked in the past. And maybe one last thing, like the worst thing I still see sometimes is newsletter 1224 by this company, right? Talk about what's in there, something that's relevant. Maybe also something that's not too far from the actual content, so people understand that they will want to click, right? That's what you want to achieve. Did that answer your question partially, at least? And yes, another one. Where was it? Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. And I have a question regarding text and email.
Yeah.
So in our sale mails, sometimes or usually we use actually text created by the graphics teams as a JPEG or as a picture. So, but now you said obviously the ratio, if you send your emails and the ratio of text and pictures is maybe balanced, it will increase or have better performance. So what can you say about that? Is it like worth it to really look that you also have text in your mail, like real text?
Yes, definitely. You should definitely have text in your email. I know graphic, like, obviously you're a bit limited in email with the fonts you can use, so I know a lot of graphics department like to put text on images. Maybe you do that every once in a while, but you should have a ratio of text. So people I mentioned on Thunderbird, on Outlook, who have image loading disabled, they will actually see the content of the email. Of course, please do use images, right? But there should be a sensible ratio of text. Also, again, considering the Barrierefreiheitsförderungsgesetz, text should not only be on images. There needs to be an alt tag for all images, so it can be read by a machine, by a reader, and the text should not be only on the image. Maybe there's a way to repeat it somewhere. I know sometimes it looks better, but I can tell you definitely the email should not just be images or one large image. Also in terms of file size, because it will not be opened by some clients. You should use regular text. There should be a decent ratio of regular text in the email, from my experience. I think there were a couple of
What about the balance? Is it fine like this? You hear me? Okay.
Yeah, ich höre ihn so.
What about the balance between text and links? Because we have a lot of complaints that there are too many links in the email and customers would wish for more info directly in the mail, but that makes it even longer. And do you have like an advice on that?
That's a bit of a tricky one. I think generally too many links in an email are difficult for the user generally to comprehend. Also, when I think about somebody opening the email, they will usually just click one link in the email. If they have a lot of discipline, they will go back to the email, but we know like we're all distracted sometimes. My advice in this case would be to send more regular emails with less content, right? Because you usually only get one click from an email, and if there's more content in the same email, and you have the problem that there are too many links in there, I feel like a lot of this will be overlooked, right? One thing I didn't mention that I would also do is generally use an automation for the people who didn't open your email to just send a reminder email and maybe a second reminder email, because those who didn't open probably weren't disturbed by it, and it's always a shame. I see so much effort and actually love go into the crafting of these emails, and if then only, let's say, 20% open, that's a bit of a shame. But I would try to reduce the number of links indeed, but I don't think I would write very, very long emails, depending on your target audience. But no, I would generally say very long emails are not that effective, and people also will not comprehend the entire content on this of the email, especially if they're reading them on a smartphone, for example. I think we had another question here, and then maybe there still. Not sure if that's open.
Do you have some do's and don'ts when it comes to A/B testing mail components to optimize the template?
Do's and don'ts. Can you specify what, like? I would encourage, because I see so many companies don't even A/B test at all. I would encourage you to do that. What do you mean as a do's and don'ts?
Well, maybe when working out a concept, well, I want to optimize the mail template or the templates.
Yes.
How should I best approach this?
Okay, yeah. So there's A/B testing, and also there's multivariate testing. So you can create different versions with the different content blocks. It depends on your audience size. If you only send to 500 people, obviously there's limited statistical significance for the groups. I would probably always start simple with something like subject line and something very clear. If you have, I don't know how advanced you are, like if you have, let's say 100,000 people you send to, you can start with multivariate testing right away. What can also be very effective is before you send to your whole audience, let's say you have 500,000 people, you A/B test to just 50,000 of them, the 2 lines you think work best. And then you see the results and you send the same email, the better working email, to the rest of the 450,000. I would look at the numbers in quite a lot of detail. And I would also do an AA test every once in a while. So you split, but you send the exact same stuff to both groups, just to see what the variation between the groups is if it's the exact same content, because that tells you something about how relevant your test is in the end. But I would always start simple and do this more, and probably, as I said, not start with the entire group necessarily, but use the learnings to send a better mail to everybody. There's one more question over there. Yeah, Mike is coming. Oh, I need to go as well.
Thank you. What's your take on using fictitious characters? Like, you know, hi, this is Lisa from company XYZ. And that was a trend like a while ago, and I still get it in my inbox at times. And I wonder if it ever were a good idea.
Okay, my personal opinion is I think in the beginning it might have worked well. Now it seems like it's the same 3 names. In my case, usually, yeah, I think Lisa is a quite common. Well, it's usually a female name, rather short, lots of A's in it. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan, but it might work really well for your target audience. I think it was the case that people felt like they were approached by a proper human being in the beginning. I think now everybody has seen through this. I think I would rather focus on the quality of the content and on personalizing the content to the audience. Try to learn, and that's maybe a trend as well. And Germany, to be honest, unfortunately, is a bit behind the international markets, UK and US. Try to gather as much information about the user that you can get by connecting your other systems, your e-com platform, whatever you have, your CRM, CDP, get the data in there. And also, super relevant and maybe surprising, as was actually a big topic for us because we recently purchased a company that only did forms. So this is not as simple as it seems. So we purchased this form company, and that's now a part of the Mailchimp offering. And putting forms into the customer journey in different points and asking nicely, people will actually give you this zero-party information, right? One example, I did a masterclass yesterday, the thank you page. You sign up for a newsletter. I sign up for a lot of newsletters for business reasons, obviously. Usually the thank you page, sometimes I think a developer put just a thank you note on it. It's an empty, like you have a navigation and you have an empty page that just says thank you for subscribing. Completely wasted opportunity there, right? You can put a form, for example, hey, tell us a bit about yourself. I don't know, you sell pet food. What type of pet do you have? What's their name? What's their age, for example? Or you ask, how frequently do you want to hear from us? This sort of thing. Or what I would always recommend, and I still don't get that with many companies, a welcome series. Get people, give them information. They signed up to your company for a reason. So give them some information, who you are, why they should buy from you, how many happy customers you have, what your product range, what is the core of your brand, what's your purpose, these things. So I'd focus on quality, on learning about the user, asking, also directly, as I said, asking about this information that will help you send better and more personalized email afterwards. Personally, I don't think the first name thing works anymore because you have just too many emails from the same names and people see through that completely. Actually, for me, I would test it, but for me personally, it's really rather reason not to click. But that's very personal and individual. Depends on the target audience. Any other questions? I think there was one. I didn't see it, but the mic is going through. Yeah. Oh, no. Hang on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have also the benchmarks for the KPIs for European countries as well?
Yes. I don't have them in my head, but
Yeah,
the download link
sending
there.
it or
Yeah, you can have it. Maybe we'll slide 5. Let's see. Slide 4. There you have benchmarks for specific individual countries, and I think that's quite important to have because just the email behavior of people in different countries is is different. Generally, one thing I want to mention, I see, and I mention this quite frequently when I give talks like that. I see German companies send too little email, and we don't make any more money if you send more email, so that's not the reason I'm saying that. It might be that Germans are more sensitive, but sometimes I see very successful companies in the UK and the US sending maybe 10 times the amount of email, not the same email to everybody, but segmenting a bit, sending personalized email. And if you send a proper email with relevant content, I think you don't have to worry as much. You can also test with just 10% of your target audience. But what I see is sending more email will usually get you more revenue. Of course, don't send the same thing to everybody and just over and over. But I see there's so much potential in the market to do more than the regular newsletter to everybody every 3 weeks. And what I love about this job and about email generally, it's so easy to prove the ROI, right? You get the data, you see immediately how much money did you get in, how many signups did you have, how many people signed up to your event, depending on your business. So that's something I would definitely encourage. And you can test this with a smaller group if you're really worried people will unsubscribe. But I see so often you can increase you can maybe double, maybe triple the amount of emails you send. Of course, depends a lot on your individual company, without increasing your unsubscribe rate significantly. I think is there yet another one?
Yeah, in the back.
Yes,
sorry.
there's another one in the corner somewhere.
I will have another question concerning the content. We already talked a little bit about the content, and we are now testing different kinds of content, also lots of animation, some native content, because we have the performance marketing very close and working there a lot with native content. So how are you about like animated GIFs, videos in emails? What do you think about that?
I think moving images, GIFs, videos, generally, we know that works well. That's where the world is going. I would obviously look at sizes. We still have, some people still have, especially like, I assume, or I know for most businesses, most people open from mobile devices. And I know still the carrier plans, the data in Germany is the most expensive, I think, in Europe. So a lot of people have turned images off or have certain restrictions when it comes to how much data they can load through their streaming, through their phone plan. Apart from that, if it's not too large, I think it's worth trying out. I think it can work well depending on your target audience. I would definitely give it a test. Of course, bear in mind that the desktop clients, as I mentioned, Outlook, Thunderbird, some people will just have these things turned off. But I think it's worth trying. I think actually it's great you're doing that because a lot of email still is quite static and that feels a bit, well, frankly, a bit boring. So if this resonates well with your audience, and I wouldn't overdo it, but depending on your audience, again, I personally wouldn't want 5 GIFs in a row. But I think using that every once in a while can really work well. But the numbers will tell you if it's a good idea. Any other question? Yes, one more.
Hi. Since we went into detail,
sorry.
Since we went into detail for the click rate, I wanted to ask, our approach is to separate the clicks from the template, so basically everything around the footer, the header, and so on, from the clicks on the actual content. So anything inside the email where we talk about the product, for example. Do you think that's a good idea, or how yeah, can this be a useful approach?
What do you mean by separating them?
So we track the clicks separate for anything that talks about the product, which would be kind of a content click, or clicks on the frame of the email. So for example, the logo or anything in the footer.
Yeah, definitely. I usually what I would do, like every click should be tracked individually anyhow. So if they click on the first image, it should be a different tracking than the first button, let's say. But yes, I'm 100% for that. I think you need to understand very clearly what element people clicked on. I think that's a good approach and good idea to do that. Usually, of course, the footer hopefully is less clicked. Because you want people to click on the actual content. But yeah, definitely. I think just overall understanding what's most relevant. You will also notice if you do this kind of tracking that people usually click at the first, like the most important block most, like they would in Google results. And the further it goes deeper, the further it goes down in the email, the less clicks you will usually get. But this helps you as well, because if something, you can have a look at that over time. If constantly the thing you put in the third place is clicked most, that might mean that the content that you think is most important is actually not the content that people are most interested in. If click is the goal and not information from the email itself, right? So I think that's well worth looking into, because you learn something about what your users actually want to read or want to click on and are interested to learn more about, versus what you thought or the organization thought was the most relevant thing they should send or you should send out. There's one more up here.
Oh, yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Personal question, not personal, but what is your opinion on, would you suggest that you put more focus in analyzing segments or content?
What do you mean by analyzing content?
I mean, working on optimizing the content to get the best content to the customers, or analyzing how to build up the best segments?
It depends on where you are. Do you already have different segments and different content that you send out?
Yes.
It depends on where you see the most room for improvement. If you have already installed like great multivariate testing on the content for the different audiences, I think I would focus more on the segments. Overall, what I see in the market is I think people tend to focus more on the content and less on the segments. This is often due to the fact that they don't have enough data on the different segments or audiences or people in the audience. So it's very difficult to answer. Gut feeling is rather segments in the overall market, but I think it's where you feel where you see more potential. You can obviously also focus on this one week or in a 2-week sprint, and then focus on the other thing and see where you get more impact. I think the beauty of segments is also it's more scalable, because you come up with smart segments once, and these segments would usually stay the same for a longer period of time, whereas content is usually used once, and you have to do the optimization over time. So I think that's the nice thing of focusing more on the segments. Same as with the automations I mentioned, I'm a big fan of that, because you put the work in once, and then every user who signs up to your website, for example, goes through that automation, automatically gets this, so benefits from that. So I think often the work on the segments is more scalable.
Thank you.
There's one.
Hi. We recently had some issues with fake bot clicks. Do you also have experience with that, or?
Yes, I'm not super like. How did you know they were fake? Like from many clicks from a certain country?
No, many clicks on the social links, for example. So many clicks on Instagram, LinkedIn, etc.
In your email?
Yes, in the footer, for example. Yeah.
Do you know if that we would need to look. I have some experience with that, but it's very specific case. We would need to look into if these emails were actually opened from an email client or from the web version of a website, and if there's any way. I mean, the clicks, they hurt you in a way that they mess with your tracking, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. So the click rate was amazing, of course, but it was not correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, there's usually you would see something about the IP addresses or the regions or something that would allow you to filter for that. It's a very specific case, but let's chat on that bilaterally. Super interesting case, but you can filter these things out. I know they're super annoying, even though they look good. But we need to look into that more specifically.
Okay, nice.
Hi.
Hi.
You mentioned earlier that, in your opinion, we don't send, or German companies don't send out enough mails. So, in your opinion, what's too much, and how much mail should you send to one segment?
Your target audience will tell you that completely. As I said, you can just slowly increase the number, or you can test the numbers. Also, you have built one segment, or let's say 10%, 20% of your audience, where you just increase the number by 2 times, 3 times, and see what happens. And if you don't see the unsubscribe rate go up, then I think that's an indication that you should monitor this over time, right? It's not just 1 week, but if you keep doing this for 3 months, and people just, for example, buy more or sign up more or something, and the complaints or like unsubscribes or spam rate complaints don't go up at all, I think you did a great job with the content because it's relevant for them. Depends a lot on the topic, also on the brand. Sometimes from some brands, I think people accept a lot of email, also a lot of communication through SMS, for example, which we offer as well. It depends how bought in they are, and it depends on the segment. But what you can also do, as I mentioned, just ask them when they sign up. Do you want to hear from us weekly, bi-weekly? Also, when they want to unsubscribe, you can ask, do you just want to hear less from us, or do you want to go leave us completely for some reason?
Thanks.
Yeah. 2 minutes left, so maybe one last question. If there's a last one, maybe that was the last one. We had quite a few. Okay, I think I'm going to let you go. If there are any questions, feel free to approach me here or at our booth. Thanks a lot.